Hey, bro, can I ask you something real quick? Have you ever noticed that some men seem steady no matter what's happening in their life? They lose their job, but they don't lose themselves. I mean, they could get criticized, but they don't seem to fall apart. Life is just hitting them, just like it's hitting everybody else. Yet somehow is that they just stay grounded. My question to you is, have you ever wondered why? Now let me ask you another question. When when life gets hard, is what changes first? Is it your circumstances or your identity? Because for a lot of men, is that those two things have become somehow became the same thing. It's like they lose their job, then they lose themselves. They lose their relationship, then they lose themselves. They lose the titles that they carry, then they lose themselves. They lose they lose the money and they lose themselves. Bro, after a while that just gets so exhausting when I think about it. And maybe that's been your story. Maybe you spent year after year trying to prove that you matter. You're trying to prove that, you know what, I'm enough. I'm more than enough. You're trying to prove that you're successful. You're trying to prove that, you know what, I'm the man. But but can I tell you something? What if what if you've been trying to earn what God already gave you? Think about that for a second. I need you to stay with me on this, because if that's true, then you've been if that's true, then you've been asking the wrong question. Maybe maybe the question isn't how do I become enough? Maybe the question is, what does God, or who does God already say that I am? Because once you can answer that, then everything else starts making sense. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why knowing who you are changes every decision that you make. Every relationship is going to change every relationship that you build, every responsibility that you carry. It's going to change every challenge that you face in life. You know, this wasn't easy for me, because there was a season where I've tried way too much of who I was to what I did. It's like I went to work, I'm handling responsibilities, I paid bills. I'm the type of person that's showing up, and from the outside, everything seems normal. Everything is looking normal. But on the inside, God was doing something, and I couldn't explain what it was. I remember I'm driving home from work, and I'm pulling up to the curb, and I'm parking my car, and I'm turning off the engine, and I'm just sitting there. And it's not because I was tired, not because I didn't want to go inside. I just I just sat there, and I'm looking back, and I realized God was God was just slowing me down long enough to ask me a question. Darren, who are you? Who are you when nobody's clapping? Who are you when your work ends? Who are you without the titles that you carry? Who are you when without the paycheck? Who are you when without everybody telling you good job? You know what, bro? That question that question wrecked me, because I realized that I have built pieces of my identity on things that can disappear overnight. And can I be honest with you? That season confused me. I thought I lost my passion. I thought something was wrong with me. But looking back, I wasn't losing myself. God was separating me from a version of me that I have outgrown. And maybe you know what? Maybe he's doing the same thing for you. But for some reason, you just don't realize it yet. And here's what I've learned. Most men don't have a confidence problem. What they really have is an identity problem. Because if you don't know who you are, then every voice starts sounding like the truth. And culture is telling you to be successful. Social media is telling you to be impressive. Your past is telling you that you're a failure. I don't know how many times I heard that. Your mistake tell you that you're disqualified. People's opinions of you, that you're not enough. And you know what? Before long, you're living your life trying to satisfy these voices that never created you. Think about a compass. A compass doesn't stop storms. It simply the compass keeps pointing north. You see, identity works the same way. Knowing who you are, it doesn't remove the pressure. It keeps the pressure from redefining you. You know what? That's why two men can go through the exact same storm and respond completely different. You see, one man can lose the job and lose himself. The other man can lose the job but never loses his identity. It's the same storm, but it's a different foundation. Because a role can change without your identity ever collapsing. Now here's something I don't want you to miss. Before Jesus performed one miracle, before he preached one sermon, before he healed one sick person, before he called one disciple, God said something. He said, in my favorite book, in Matthew 3, it tells us that after Jesus was baptized, the heavens opened and the Spirit descended like a dove, and then the Father spoke, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." Think about that. Jesus haven't even started his public ministry yet. He haven't even multiplied bread. He haven't even walked on water. He didn't even raise Lazarus from the dead yet. He haven't even gone to the cross. Yet the Father said to him, "This is my beloved Son." Do you see that? Identity came before the assignment. He was accepted. Acceptance came before activity. Sonship came before service. Bro, that's huge, because so many of us have it all backwards. We're thinking that if I do enough, then God is going to accept me. If I perform enough, I'll finally be enough. But God says, no. First, know whose you are. Then live. Then once you know whose you are, then you start to live from that place. And now here's the verse that completely changed the way I see myself. In my favorite book, in 2 Corinthians 5:17, it says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, He is a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. Think about that. That phrase, new creation. That's so incredible. The Greek word for new is kainos. And kainos, it doesn't mean repair. It doesn't mean improve. It doesn't mean a better version of the old. What it means is that something entirely new in quality, something that never existed before. I want you to really think about that. God didn't rescue you to polish the old man. He created a new man. So maybe the reason that the old way of thinking don't fit anymore is because God isn't trying to improve your old identity. He's really not. He's teaching you to live from the old one. That's why some things don't satisfy you anymore. That's why some conversations, they feel empty to you now. That's why certain environments are making you uncomfortable. You're not weird. You're not a weirdo. It's just that you're growing now. And you know what Paul says? He says something else in Romans 12. It says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Notice the contrast. The world tries to conform you, but God is in the process of transforming you. The world wants you to fit in, but God says, become. The world works from the outside. The world works from the outside in. They look at successful. They look confident. They look important. They look like you've got it all together. Everything with them is appearance, but God works from the inside out. He changes. What he's doing, he's changing your identity. Then, you know what? Then your thinking changes. Then your choices change. Then your habits begin to change. Then the best thing of all is that your life begins to change. See, the behavior is the fruit, and identity, your identity is the root. And most men, you know what most men are doing? They keep trying to change the fruit. Why? I mean, why you're trying to change the fruit while ignoring the root? I mean, but healthy fruit always grows from healthy roots. And you know what? That's why I've been saying on this channel that God is changing who you are before he changes what you do. Because identity determines your posture, and posture will determine your direction. And I want you to understand, here's what happens when your identity when your identity gets settled, it becomes a filter. And instead of asking what do people instead of what do people want me to do, start asking does this match the man that God says I am? That's a question now. Every decision runs through a different filter. Every relationship, every opportunity, every habit, every conversation. Because when identity is settled, you don't need every opportunity. You only need the right assignment. And bro, if you don't know who you are, as I shared with you before, every voice is going to sound like truth. But when you know who you are in Christ, you stop living from approval. And what you're going to do, you're going to start living from acceptance. And that is going to change everything. Now here's the question. What actually changes? What actually changes when a man knows who he is? Everything? Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because he becomes steady. First, he gains clarity. He stops asking, what does everybody expect from me? And starts asking, what does God call me to do? You see the difference? You see where I'm getting at? Do you feel what I'm dropping on you? Knowing who you are doesn't make every decision easier. It makes every decision much, much clearer, because every opportunity that comes your way isn't your assignment. Every door that opens isn't from God. Every invitation doesn't deserve a yes right away. Identity becomes the filter. Second, a man gains peace, not because problems are going to disappear, because the war inside of him begins to quiet down. He's no longer trying to prove anything to anybody. What he's not trying to prove. God already declared, And third, he gains this confidence. Not loud confidence, not arrogant confidence, that quiet confidence, that kind that doesn't need to announce himself, to announce who he is. That kind that doesn't need the room to agree with him. Because a man who knows who he is, he doesn't need everyone else to tell him that. He really don't. Because he has this quiet confidence about himself. He knows who he is now. And think about it. Think about this. Two men, right, lose their jobs. One loses his paycheck and loses himself. The other loses his paycheck but never loses his identity. He walks into the house. This man now walks in the house, looks at his wife, and he says, I lost my job today, but I didn't lose. Who am I? The same situation, but as I said before, it's a different foundation. Think about the marriage. One husband hears correction, and he immediately starts getting defensive, getting mad and angry. Why? Because he thinks that his identity is being under attack. Another husband can say, you know what? You're right. I need to grow there, because You know what? Because being wrong doesn't make him worthless. He separates his behavior from his identity. And what that does, that's growing in maturity. Think about fatherhood. Some men believe that their greatest responsibility is bringing home a paycheck. I mean, provision matters, absolutely, but your children don't just need what's in your wallet. They need what's in your heart. They need your presence. They need your wisdom. They need your prayers. They need your attention. One day your kids may forget the toys that you brought them, but they'll never forget. I want you to get this. They will never forget the man that you've shown them. Think about leadership. A man who doesn't know who he is leads to go out there and go out there and impress people. But a man who knows who he is, he leads to serve people. This is a huge difference that you gotta catch this. One man is trying to build this image for people to recognize. The other builds people. Think about temptation. When identity is weak, temptation gets a whole lot louder, because temptation always whispers that you need this. You deserve this. This is what's going to satisfy you. But identity is going to answer back. I already know who I belong to. And you know what, bro? Temptation becomes different when you remember who you are. Not because you're stronger, but because your identity is stronger. Think about pressure. Pressure doesn't create your character. What pressure does, it reveals what your character is resting on. That's why a grounded man can face criticism without collapsing. He can face rejection without believing that he's rejected. He can fail without believing that he's a failure. He can wait without believing God forgot about him, because his identity isn't attached to the outcome. His identity is attached to Christ. So, can I tell you something? I wish somebody had told me years ago, a title is something that you hold. Identity is who you are. A paycheck is something that you earn. Identity is something that you receive. Purpose is what you do. Identity is the man. Identity is the man that's doing it. That's why I've learned that to stop asking what makes me look successful, and I start asking, does this match the man that God created me to be? And bro, that's one question that has changed my life, because every decision is a confession of who you believe that you are. Here's something I want you to know, or here's something that I want you to see. All throughout Scripture, God has a pattern, and he you know what? He never changes it. He establishes a man's identity before he gives him an assignment. Look at Adam. God created him in his image before he ever told him to tend to the garden. Let me turn my car on real quick. It's kind of hot. Look at Gideon. Gideon is hiding in a wine press, afraid. And what does God call him? He called him a mighty man of valor. But wait a minute. He wasn't acting like a mighty man. And God wasn't speaking to Gideon's condition. He was speaking to Gideon's identity. And look at David. David was an anointed king years before he ever sat on the throne. God settled who he was before the assignment ever caught up. And look at Peter. Jesus looked at Simon, a man who was impulsive. He was unstable. He always put his foot in his mouth. And he said, "You are Peter, the rock." And Peter didn't look like a rock, but Jesus wasn't speaking to who Peter was at that moment. He was speaking to the man that Peter will become. Do you see the pattern? See, God speaks identity. He speaks identity before assignment. Why? Because if the assignment comes before identity, if assignment comes before your identity, your work becomes your worth, and that's a burden. No man wasn't created to carry any type of work before assignment before their identity. So this is why everything that I do on this channel comes back to the 4 questions. Not because they're catchy, because they're biblical. Question 1 is, who am I? That's dealing with identity. Question 2 is, why did God create me? That's purpose. Question 3 is, what am I created for? Why did he create me? That's assignment. Question number 4, what are my responsibilities as a man? That's dealing with stewardship. Now, I want you to notice the order. It's identity, purpose, assignment, and responsibility. But we go by this. We go by responsibility. We're trying to earn our identity, not assignment. We're trying to prove worth. Identity comes first, because when you know who you are, your purpose becomes clearer. Your assignment becomes lighter. Your responsibility becomes worship instead of the weight that's on you. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to do this week. Don't even wait. Before you make your next major decision, I want you to sit back and ask yourself this question. What does this decision say about who I believe I am? Before you react to criticism, I want you to ask, am I defending my identity? Or simply receiving correction. Before you say yes to another commitment, I want you to ask, is this actually my assignment? Or am I trying to prove something? Before you compromise, ask, does this match the man that God says I am, I already am? And bro, if those questions have changed your life, then I believe they're going to begin to continue to change your life each and every day. So I want to leave you with this, with one last thought. Remember that that season I told you about, sitting in my car after work, I'm sitting there thinking that something was wrong, and I'm looking back and I could finally see what God was doing. He wasn't taking something away from me. He wasn't stripping away everything. I had mistaken I mistaken him for my identity. I put the job the job was never me. The paycheck was never me. The title was never me. Other people's opinions, they were never me. Performance was never me. What God was doing, God was teaching me to become the same man everywhere. The same man at work, the same man at home, the same man at church, the same man when nobody is watching. Because that's what happens when your identity is rooted in Christ. It's an awesome thing. It really is. So let me leave you with this. You're going to lose some things in life. In this life, you might lose your job. You might lose your title. You might lose opportunities. You might lose seasons. You might lose people. You might lose plans. But if you know who you are, you never have to lose yourself, because your identity was never built on those things to begin. Your identity was never built on those things to begin with anyway. The strongest man isn't the one who never faces the storms. It's basically the one whose identity doesn't change when the storms come. So what I need you to do is just stop chasing an identity that the world could never give you. Stop letting the world define what God has already declared about you. It's time that you walk as the man God says that you are. It's time that you lead from that identity. It's time that you love from that identity. It's time that you work from that identity. It's time that you serve from that identity. It's time that you live from that identity, because when your identity is settled, your purpose becomes clearer. Your assignment becomes focus. Your responsibilities become meaningful. Your life begins to reflect the man that God created you to be. I'm Darren McKoy, and I'm the Purpose Navigator. And what I do is that I help men discover who God created them to be, so they can stop merely existing and begin living their life with purpose. And you know what? If this video encouraged you, I ask that you subscribe and join me each week as we walk the purpose path together. And I want you to remember this: you were created by God for God's purpose. And now it's time for you to discover it. Discover it and walk in it.